meeting of, first meeting of the year. We would like to go ahead and start off with a roll call. Gariana, if you could help support us with that.
Of course. Starting with Chief Issa Eamon Kraus,
Present.
Ellen McDonald,
Present.
DA Diana Becton,
Present.
Lynn Mackey,
Present.
Gilbert Salinas, Michael Pearson,
Present.
Shayla Bonner,
Present.
Stephanie Medley, Cheryl Sutter, Matthew Malone,
Present.
LaShante Smith, Melvin Willis,
Here.
Gigi Crowder.
Here.
We have 10 members present. Quorum is established.
Thank you, Gariana. Next, we want to hop into our introductions, and I think we could start with the folks on Zoom, starting with Chris.
Good afternoon, Chris James here, the W. Haple Burns Institute. Good to see everybody.
Gariana.
Hello, my name is Gariana Youngblood, and I'm with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Liana? Or Leanna? I'm sorry if I mispronounced it.
Yes, hi, I'm Liana Willis, and I'm with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
And Michelle?
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Elizondo, and I'm too with the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Hi, everybody. Patrice Guillory here from the Office of Reentry and Justice. I'm not on camera, I'm over here.
Then we'll start this way.
Oh, Kendra Carr, with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. Hello, everyone.
Good afternoon, Peter Kim, also with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice.
Michael Pearson, I'm with the firm Fee Counsel and good to be here.
Melvin Willis, I'm with the Racial Justice Coalition.
Ronell Ellis, Health Right 360, community-based organization. Glad to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. E.C. McFrost, Chief Probation Officer.
Jill Ray with the Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson.
Shayla Bonner, also with the Racial Justice Coalition and Safe Return Project.
Ellen McDonald, good afternoon, Chief Public Defender.
Hello, Matt Malone, Chief Counsel for the Court.
Hello, Annie Esposito, Assistant District Attorney, District Attorney's Office.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dinah Becton, District Attorney.
Hi, all. Gigi Crowder, Executive Director of NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness here in Contra Costa.
Happy birthday, Maggie, Attorney Superintendent of Schools.
It's good to see everybody, right? Oh my God, it's been a long time since we met. We're gonna go ahead and move to our announcements. Are there any announcements at this time? Hearing and seeing none. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which are public comments on any item under just this jurisdiction of the Racial Justice Oversight Body and not on this agenda. We'll open it up for public comment. I know, right? Oh, we go. Chris.
Yeah, sorry. It's not even really public comment. It's just if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if you guys plan to do this maybe later. I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes, but did ORJ want to make an announcement about the RSVPs ahead of the meeting and the importance of that and trying to figure out quorum for folks who might be traveling? Just wanted to make sure we flag that.
Sure, I'm happy to do so. We do have 2 other members, LaShante Smith and Stephanie Medley, who will be joining us shortly. They're had a previous meeting that was kind of delayed a bit, but they'll be here soon. So as I'm speaking, here we go.
You don't need that.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, so along that line, I know Gariana has been sending out emails to you guys asking for RSVPs. Just really important that you respond to those when you get them so that we can have a sense of whether or not we'll be able to make quorum. We know some of you have to travel a long way. I think Shayla's even traveling from as far as Stockton to get there. So certainly if we know ahead of time that we're not going to make quorum, then we don't want folks to have to pull a UE in the middle of the street on their way there. We want to be able to let folks know. And obviously, hopefully we want to have everyone there and make quorum and have our meetings as scheduled. But in the event of something coming up, we just do want to be able to give folks that courtesy who are coming a long way. So that's the purpose of the RSVPs. And so just want to make sure that folks utilize that to kind of keep us aware of where we are with quorum.
Thank you, Chris. I didn't realize that's what you were reminding me of. And we'll also try to, just for the sake of considering folks' travel time, that if we haven't solidified quorum internally 2 hours ahead of the meeting time, then we will just go ahead and cancel the meeting. So that way folks don't have to go out of their way to try to make it here. As you say, do a UE on the freeway.
Just to circle back. Welcome. Hi. We just did a round of introductions. You can introduce yourself.
Okay, hi everyone, Lashante Smith, Director of Student School Climate. So I oversee all the student services in West Contra Costa Unified School District.
Are there any more public comment? All right, so we'll move to approval of the record of action from the September 21st, 2023 quarterly meeting. It's attachment number 1, which is on page 4. Just review it real quick and then somebody to make a motion to approve. And move to the record of action. Do you have a second? Turn it over to, wait, is it public comment first and then? Okay, so public comment before we move to approve the roll call vote. Any public comment on the record of action? All right, hearing and seeing none. Mariana, if you could do a roll call vote for us.
Sure can. Starting with Chief Isa, Eamon Kraus,
Yes.
Ella McDonald,
Yes.
DA Diane Beckton,
Yes.
Lynn Mackey,
Yes.
Michael Pearson,
Yes.
Shayla Bonner,
Yes.
Rodnell Ellis,
Yes.
Lashante Smith,
Yes.
Melvin Willis,
Yes.
Gigi Crowder.
Yes.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Motion carries.
Thank you, everybody. Next we'll move to agenda item number 4, which is to review work plan and prioritize goals and objectives for 2024. That is attachment number 2, pages 7 through 20. If I can get a little help with this infantry
Yeah, so, what's provided before you, are 2 sets of items within this attachment. One is just a brief slide overview of our jobs activities over the past year. Some of these slides will be incorporated in an annual update that will be presented to the equity committee, hopefully by next week, or not next week, next month. And this is, we thought that it would be imperative to share this with you guys, just to kind of reset everyone. And then also take a look at, the prior year's work plans, where the leadership of our job had an opportunity to go through some of the items that were listed there to identify of these activities, which have we made some progress on, have actually completed, and what are some other low-hanging items that may need to be prioritized going forward. So I'll turn it over to Chris to maybe walk folks through some of the activities of the prior year as a reset and also go into the work plan activities.
All right. Yeah, so I think there wasn't a whole lot, to sort of report in the same way to the equity committee this time around. And that's no shade or, no shots. Just saying that, we didn't end up having as many meetings as we planned in a lot of the subcommittees, over this past year. And so it allows us to kind of, I think, focus the equity committee's attention to these sort of larger structural issues, and some of the same sort of questions and ideas that have come up, a number of times, right? Like, is our job really structured to do implementation, right? Which is sort of what its charge is. And so with that, just providing a bit of an overview of what actions the R job has taken up to this point, kind of moving that to a timeline format as opposed to sort of a list, and just letting people visually see, sort of what actions, this body has taken, or at least, some of those actions, resulting in recommendations that may not have been, completely approved or followed up on. And I mean, I think you guys can all, sort of see and reminisce on, some of the work that you've done up to date, including, endorsement of Miles Hall Non-Police Response Unit, and the Miles Hall Lifeline Act, the data requests by the data subcommittee, wanting to recognize probation for, being the first system agency to really work with, the R job to present information as best they could, despite, the various changes to the requests or the, further questions that we had with every, bit of data that we got. Also things such as, the sheriff's oversight board requests, right? That community has continued to reiterate, and which the board responded to with an oversight report that the data subcommittee continues to push to refine in a way that is helpful to the overall, I think, sort of endeavors to get more and better data from our system partners to inform the work that we're doing now. This is just a more itemized, or more detailed, I should say, itemized list, including activities, as well as, I think that the actions is more about like the recommendations that were made or the official, actions that were taken. But there's so many activities that happen in between actual recommendations. And so sort of listing some of the things that each subcommittee has done, including the community forums, the multiple attempts to really build out a youth advisory council, which in large part is a ways from being finished because it's being done thoughtfully. And I think the way that we've tried to do it and be inclusive of youth at every point of it, as opposed to creating a space, you know, that's created by a bunch of adults, and then, to have youth like meaningfully participate in it and hopefully enjoy it and continue to come back. We know that's not a workable sort of way to do that. The data subcommittee and its decision points matrix, the collection of all of the data that we, were collecting and reporting at one point. The many requests that were made to various different spaces, asking for this information directly, with diversion subcommittee, compiling a list of, all the current programs at the time, right? May need some updates, because it's been a couple years, I think, since we did that. The definition of diversion and the guidelines for usage, right? And away from development of preliminary recommendations, also now, recommendations are really starting to take shape and be refined. I think the adult recommendations really just need another glance from the diversion subcommittee, because it's been a while since we've seen them, just to make sure everybody's comfortable with them as we move forward and looking at the youth recommendations, and hope to finalize those and substantively discuss those very soon as well. So those are just some of the activities that have been undertaken that have not yet resulted in recommendations or actions from this body, but that are pending, completion, going to materialize in those ways. Excuse me. And so for last year, these are, I think, the main sort of items of work that took place over, an abbreviated year, right? So there was a lot of work, particularly early on in the public statement that all of you weighed in on and helped to refine and develop in response to the text message scandal from Antioch Police Department, or the individual officers involved with that. That is support and development of, really support for community healing spaces, and that's something that hopefully the CEF can pick back up as it shifts its focus to more community involvement, community engagement, and really building community partnerships from here on out. The request for more clarity on the Our Jobs role as far as the recommendations and how to implement them, as I alluded to before, and continuing to try to build the dialogue, the direct communication between the Our Job and the board, and any of the board's subcommittees. So there are a number of goals and objectives here. I won't spend too much time on these. I think, for those of you who are involved in the subcommittees, you have some sense of what they are, and we're going to go into looking at work plans and I think some highlighted items to make some decisions or have further discussion about what these goals and objectives are. But like I said, for CEF, one of the main objectives, as you see in bold there, is building stronger community participation and connections. We want to make sure that community voice is centered in this work, and just see the CEF as the main vehicle by which to accomplish that. And so want to make sure that meeting space becomes a meeting space that really sort of fuels that community involvement and that community voice, meaning not just, an occasional 2 or 3 people jumping in on a Zoom call, but how do we center these meetings in community? How do we structure the meetings to ensure that community has a space, even if they can't attend other subcommittee meetings, which of course they're always welcome to. How do we make sure that the CEF is a space that provides community with updates about even what's going on in the other subcommittees or with the Our Job at large, so that they can weigh in, realizing that some of that probably means that, between the hours of 9 and 5 may not be the best time to do that, to make sure that folks can actually show up and fully participate and be heard, and that we can take as much public comment as possible, and just have as many people from the community who are concerned or who want to be able to attend. With the data subcommittee, working with local system agencies to improve collection of data. We talked a little bit in our last data subcommittee meeting about, sort of educating folks, or really continuing some education that at least started within the subcommittee itself about best practices for data collection, data sharing, looking at data usage agreements, all of these sorts of topics, and just items of discussion to ensure that there is continuity and and stability among the various different agencies for how data is being collected and shared, and supporting analyses of interventions and their impact on disparities, right? So when we think about data, we think a lot about the various agencies that are involved, and that's good, but that's one half of the picture that we're trying to get a better understanding of. We also need to understand how well any interventions that are currently underway, or any programs or services that are currently in operation, are working. And so it's important to also have that capacity and that level of information collection from our programmatic or system or service providing partners, to make sure that those systems can also be evaluated, or those programs can also be evaluated and refined as necessary based on what the data tells us. And then for diversion, primary goal is we really want to nail this criteria down. I think we're really, really close, right, on both fronts. And because that is something that we can do directly with the DA's office, and the DA's office has been so open and supportive, and willing to, once agreements are reached, move those criteria into, an office protocol. It's a real opportunity, right, for this body to feel like, and not even just to feel like, but to actually produce a meaningful result in a way that may result in the types of utilization of alternatives that we would want to see, and that we want the work in this body to produce. So really excited about diversion and its potential this year. I think the recommendations here are, basically summed up by these 3 points. So number one, recalibration or reconfiguration of the R job for more autonomy and impact, right? Like, what does that look like for the R job to have more of a role, more of a say in, ultimately what does or does not happen, as opposed to making recommendations that can be dismissed, or can be adopted in a way that sort of no longer represents the crux of what was being recommended in the first place. And how do we transition to something that is more decisive, more powerful, and able to have more direct impact in the areas that the R job is making its recommendations. Along that line, I think it's going to be very important to invite the equity committee, as well as other members of the board, to the next quarterly meeting. I think this is something we probably should have been doing, but I mean, on my end, I will say I've always sort of been trying to predicate those invites often on recommendations, right? Like, do we have recommendations to discuss? And so how do we get those recommendations and then invite them to a meeting where we can substantively discuss what's being recommended? And I think that was, while I understand my rationale, which is, not saying very much, I don't think that was the best approach. I think because there hasn't been a very strong line of direct communication between this body and the Board of Supervisors, who make ultimate decisions on the recommendations you make, at least as you are currently constructed. I think even when there is not a recommendation for them to act on, there should be more direct communication, and that means probably with the way that their meetings are structured and the various things that come up in their meetings that they're having to respond to or hear and then take up to the larger board for action. The best approach is to invite them to your space and to be able to discuss what you think that recalibration or reconfiguration might need to look like. Whatever frustrations you all may have right now with the lack of momentum that seems to impact this work, what the potential for this is, what your vision for this work is, and how you would like to build a stronger and more direct partnership with them to do the work that you all signed up and graciously give of your time consistently to do. So I will be making that formal invite. And the last one is continuing to build direct partnerships with justice system partners, or perhaps I should say to build better relationships with justice system partners, because, I just mentioned DA Becton, and the DA's office and their, willingness to say, sure, we'll look at, diversion eligibility criteria, and we're willing to, sort of negotiate and figure out, where there's room to make some changes and then to implement that within the office. And we don't need, this same sort of approval process that sometimes can hold up the work in this particular space, because it's literally like an office level decision or a particular agency level decision to be made, right? And so in the meantime, while we're discussing the recalibration or reconfiguration of the R job for more autonomy and impact, and however long that takes, if there are spaces where there are conversations or actions that involve specific agencies and we can build the relationships to move things along with those agencies directly, it's a way to continue to build momentum and to work toward seeing some progress in terms of the recommendations and the charge overall that the R job has.
Thank you, Chris. Was this a part of your presentation? Are we opening it up for questions right now, or is that just there?
I think we can. I mean, I think we're probably going into just more of me speaking on the work plan items. So I mean, definitely it's a good time to pause for questions. I would say once we have the date down, if folks want to participate or be there at the equity committee meeting where this presentation will go forward to be heard, you definitely should. And I'm happy to have you and happy to yield time for you, or if you're going to be there, I might through ORJ ask for permission to throw to folks, or to invite folks into the discussion if I can do that without too much trouble, or something like that, if folks want to speak on the record directly to the equity committee. Obviously, if you can't, that's why I'm inviting them to come to the next quarterly. So that whole meeting really should be about obviously any substantive updates that we have about any of the work that is already underway, but mostly about engaging them directly. So there should be hopefully multiple opportunities in the coming months for you to speak directly to the equity committee.
So we'll pause right here and just see if there's any public comment at this time, or folks from Gigi.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, Christopher, about the work we should be doing and making sure the Board of Soups are connected to it. I think that the only time I recall that we took anything was our recommendation around sheriff oversight. And we did not get, what we wanted, I think, from the Board of Soups. So the equity committee with more with Supervisor Julia and Supervisor Glover, I regularly attended. And maybe we need to build support for things with arguments from community members, because that one is well attended by community members. And I also wanted to appreciate the fact that I had not known that this committee had supported the Mouse Hall. You know, I didn't see the full scope of the work that was being done here, so I appreciate that. And I also want to lift up the fact that the Quinto family, Angelo Quinto family now have the Quinto Foundation, and they were champions in getting the governor to sign that you can no longer use excited delirium as a rationale for killing an individual. And so I wonder if there's any opportunity for us to monitor if that's been embraced in this county, because prior to that being signed, it was often used in this county. So I'm curious how the sheriff has shifted. I didn't see any news release or anything like that that says we will no longer do it. So I think sometimes you have to monitor that. So thank you. It's a law. You got to know about the law in order for the law to be established in such a way that it's, you know, it's adhered to. So I've spoken to some sheriffs and they didn't know. So I don't know if that, not that they would make the decision, but they didn't even know the law had passed and that it was a family in Antioch that championed it. Thanks.
Any other comments, questions?
Thank you, Chris, for putting that together. We thought the slides, really good visual, and I think a really nice walkthrough of kind of reminding all of us of the different directions where we've gone and where we're headed. And I think Gigi's comments reminded me of something that occurred to me. I know the county, of course, has the Board of Supervisors will take positions, the county will take positions on legislation. And so I don't know if it's worth having a discussion about whether the racial justice oversight body, with any bills that were kind of pertinent to the scope of our job work, would study those, take community input, and have this group make a recommendation to the legislative committee of the Board of Supervisors, if there was something, you know, pertinent to the scope of work that this group focuses on. And so that would be, again, for, I guess, either this group to directly advocate for legislation that's pending statewide, or for this group to advocate to the Board of Supervisors for the county to take certain positions.
Yeah, in terms of the recommendations, I don't necessarily have any issue with them. I think they're good general recommendations. Part of me, I don't know, part of me is just figuring out, like, whenever we as a quarterly board, like, kind of reach an impasse, or I think I know in the past, like even before I got on here, there were efforts for like the community funding, for the community funding and engagement committee. There was like efforts to like create that funding source or create that pot of money. And I think there was even a recommendation from talking to Chris that did actually go to the Board of Supervisors, and it didn't get accepted. It was basically like, okay, yeah, push back, try again with a new outline. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a subcommittee for a committee that meets every quarter, and everybody around this table has some sort of very high demanding established job, and creating a policy recommendation is a labor of love in itself. So if we're really going to be putting some good recommendations out there to the board, or reach some sort of impasse, like some sort of, I don't know, consulting budget or something for more technical assistance, so we're able to like make more informed decisions as we're having that conversation with the Board of Supervisors of the type of policies or initiatives that we need to have. And I think for me, that's the main thing missing outside of the support that we are getting from Burns Institute and county staff. I think there is more technical support on some of these issues that we're talking about that we need, so we can make a more informed and direct recommendation without spinning our wheels consistently. If we're talking about how we're going to restructure our job to make more of an impact, some sort of technical assistance fund for us for whenever we reach those type of issues, I think would be something that I would like to explore. So this is a committee that is successful and people feel like they're getting the most out of their time too when we're showing up.
Yeah, I agree. We do have a renewed commitment to, just that, as far as the, community engagement, committee. So we're looking forward to some new actions and some new processes in order to try to move that, forward. So, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, we, just met this week, talking about some new stuff, so, and I just became chair, so I'm looking to, do exactly what it says, engage with the community, but also to, build that network up and then getting the voice out, letting them know we need this stuff and making sure that, we go to the right sources to generate those funds and, get back behind that because, the problem is, I don't think our voice has been ringing loud enough, getting visible, being active, and then, really engaged. So being out there and getting our voice, our agenda and things like that, moved forward with all the people that we need to do it with. So I'm looking forward to that commitment, going forward. So, yeah. Glad you mentioned it. It's important.
Any other public comment?
Yeah, I'd like to the recommendations and the goal, but my commitment and push to be here to make quorum is because ultimately I think the goal should be to reduce the racial disparities, and I didn't see that specifically written down. I saw ways to get there, but ultimately we know what we're facing here in this county with who we're, criminalizing and placing in jail. So that has to be the ultimate goal, is to break the school to prison pipeline and to start seeing our criminal justice system be more in line with what you would expect with the demographic data that we have for this county.
Yeah. I was running a workshop last night. And, out of, I don't know, I had 15, maybe 16 individuals there formerly incarcerated. It was people that were sitting there that did over 100 and some years in the room. And, just the most recent person that did 36 years had only been out a couple months. So the amazing piece is, me being formerly incarcerated myself, and I always say finding a formula for, post-incarceration success is a multiplicity. It's not one shot angle that you can take to, get to that point. But I always say that I had a unique situation, things that were helping me be successful at the time of my former incarceration and getting things, getting to a better place, they're different. I mean, I had a 2-year drug treatment facility I was in. I mean, I don't really know what to do with 30 days of recovery. I don't know what to do with 30 days of treatment or 60 days. I don't even know if I'm still detoxing. It takes 18 months to detox. And when you're formerly incarcerated, and that's just coming off the street. But when you're formerly incarcerated, you did a lot of time. There's other things that, sometimes you haven't heard a horn honk, and there's sounds, right? There's sounds that you kind of afraid of. You don't really know how to cross the street, you haven't crossed a literal formal street in a long time. So, sounds, actions, things are different, technology, there's a lot of things that's going on. And we assume, I go to the PAC meeting and talk to individuals, to try to get them resources. And, you know, how long you been out? Oh, I've been, let me see, let me count, I think since Monday. And they just did 27 years and they're already trying to catch a bus. That process sometimes can be challenging. And I think there's a lot that goes into that. And then we have, a lot of it is voluntary. So, it's hard to get folks engaged, when they know they need to, but they don't know how to. So to really shrink the disparity coming from me, I believe it's gonna take more than just one approach. And so, and I know tradition and all those things, sometimes you try to get away from that, you try to figure out something new, figure out something different, but the structure of what we think will allow somebody to come from that place to go to a better place, I just don't think there's enough of it available, right? Whether it be drug treatment, housing, resources, mental health, this and that. I mean, I'm a case manager. It's some things, my hands are tied. I can't even refer people to all these different things because the system won't let me. But I'm supposed to have resources, so that's difficult. And then somebody comes to you, they ask for these things, you say, oh, I can point you in this direction, and then you hope another agency may be able to serve them. So I just think those things are critical. And in order to really tackle that, you have to really have all these things in place to be able to surgically. And then it's not even a blanket you can throw over it. Everybody's individual situation in the courtroom and how they got to prison and how they got out is totally different. You know, I'm sitting here, I've been out 32 years, clean and sober, no interaction with the law, but I own a home in this county. And I can't even get a firearm to protect my house because I'm an ex-felon, but I never had weapons charges. So you look at me like, but I'm part of the solution. I've been had a mortgage in this county for 22 years. Part of the solution. I can't, right? So Constitution don't always really apply to me, even though I'm abiding by all the laws of citizenship. So there's a lot of things that's quirky and that, you know, you don't get restoration or true restoration. You don't get restored. I've been on parole for 30 plus years. It doesn't matter though. I still can't get jobs. I still can't have fun. I can't protect my family. I can't do this. I'm still, I'm not commit no crimes. So when we talk about trying to shrink that disparity, it's a lot we have to do. But if we give a smidgen of opportunity when you need, a gallon of it, then it's the wrong medicine. So, it's just interesting. And that's the hard part. We keep, it's tough. It's really tough. So, and that's where I think, the reality is, are we really tackling something that needs to be tackled? Or are we, the difference between drug treatment and sobriety, and then you have heroin addicts or something that's on Suboxone or methadone. And some of the terms we use, we don't even pay attention to. It's called maintenance. It's not called drug treatment. It's maintenance, which means maintain your status of being an addict and never get over getting clean, right? Some people have been on that stuff for 30 years. So you're not going anywhere. Overcoming those things takes another approach. So sometimes we have to really look at the reality or the real true terms and concepts of what we're trying to take care of. So I don't man, the disparity is tough. That part.
I saw Judy hand and then I saw Melvin.
I think we had.
Oh, was your hand up first? I'm sorry.
I'll just go. What you was just saying just now just really made me think a long time ago. I know the county, probably happens every year, but I'm not in every single meeting. But I think the county or probation or one of the departments did talk about different challenges on folks who are reentering the community and how bad recidivism was and some of those challenges of recidivism. And that's one area that I'd like to look at and see, like, how are we evaluating that or trying to help mitigate recidivism? Because even whether you're incarcerated or even if you're homeless even, or just in some sort of transitional housing, it can just be very hard financially just to get back on your feet and have a stable foundation underneath you. And if somebody doesn't have a stable foundation underneath them, you're putting them into a corner where they're forced to survive. And survival is not pretty. It's not pretty at all. It is just survival. It's just raw. And I know, not in Contra Costa, but I did have like adjacently a poor experience with transitional housing. To make a long story short, had my companion's family member, they were going through a manic episode to where they had to be institutionalized for a short amount of time, but they couldn't go back home. They had to go to basically a halfway house situation. I took them to that halfway house situation. I showed up. I didn't even want to stay there. I was walking back to my car after we dropped them off saying, are we sure we want to leave them back here? And I get a call less than 12 hours later saying, please come get me. I'm scared for whatever the reason may be. So it's not just, I say that to just bring up an example that we can't just say, oh, this program or this transitional housing is here. It's all good. We need to evaluate the quality of the service that's being provided and basically doing that thing where we're asking ourselves, like, if you're telling somebody to go to the service or if you're telling somebody that this is what's available to you, ask yourself first, would you want to be here? And if that answer is no, then there's something that needs to be nipped in the bud on how we're creating a quality service that is actually not being counterproductive to the goal that we're trying to reach, which is getting people integrated back into society so they can build a healthy, happy life with a stable foundation underneath them. But if you're dealing with your record being held against you or dealing with bad credit or history of whatever it may be that somebody may kind of look down on you, say, I don't know if I want you here, that's not going to help get our community better. And we're just perpetuating that cycle of somebody either being another statistic or worst case scenario back in our institutions where they're incarcerated again. I think that's the part we need to avoid. So yeah, all that's to say is, like, I think it would be worthwhile to have that kind of presentation here on like what's happening in Contra Costa County, the challenges of recidivism, the barriers that different demographics are reaching when it comes to entering in these services and building out solutions on like, how can we make that better, or how are we streamlining it and taking away those barriers so it's working and achieving the goal that we want it to reach.
So my hope is that we won't have any reentry because we will prevent people from even needing to go at a young age. I just had a conversation with my neighbor here about many family members want more beds, more beds. I'm trying to keep people out of beds. I'm trying to not build a system that creates opportunities for the worst case scenario. I'm trying to approach things from preventative. And I think if we survey community members, they would like that too. They would like to see us reimagine youth justice, adult justice in such a way that we are doing approaches that are community defined. That we're saying, we see this person has been challenged with an adverse childhood experience. And before they make a poor decision based on not being addressed, we put the kind of funding into working with them at that core level. That's why I love that investment in safe, natural environment for the individuals And sadly, it's not always school for all community members because we have the disparities there as well. But I think we need to attack the disparities where we see them popping up, and that's the school to prison pipeline. The idea of recidivism is only there because we have screwed up things earlier parts of people's life. I think that's a common understanding that we all can embrace. So attention to that. Why, as I asked this question before, why do some children make a poor decision that could be even criminal in nature and they get a pass and others not get a pass? And when they make that, how do we then approach them so they don't make it again? Not go back to jail, but not make the mistake or bad behavior again that could lead them to jail. That's where I think we would be using the best use of our time.
So what I'm hearing, just in listening to all these really great comments and feedback, really does support this recommendation on recalibration though, and reconfiguration, because so many of the things that are said are conversations that are occurring at other tables that maybe not everybody is at, but I'm at most of them, or my staff are, right? And so like a lot of the conversations I'm hearing around recidivism and reentry and so forth, that's happening around our cap space with the 109 and those subcommittees. You know, there's the whole entire body of juvenile work, and one could argue that sometimes those conversations occur in too many forums. They're very similar conversations also. But I think that's why this top recommendation of really looking at this body, its sort of purpose, intent, its scope, and making it narrow enough that it's really effective with its recommendations. Because I think if we don't have a narrow enough scope, what we do is we keep talking about the same things in too many spaces, and it waters down the impact of our collective recommendation. So that's just my support for these recommendations.
Public comment? Thank you again, Chris, for putting that together for us. If there's no more public comment, we can move to the next. Oh, go ahead.
Well, just before we move on, and I know Chris and I talked about this, and I know I've mentioned it at past meetings. I think the first recommendation is the most important one right now. I've been on here for a few years, and in the beginning, we did a lot of research, collected a lot of data. We got a lot of participation from, probation and the sheriff. Like, we got a lot of information and gathered the information. Part of the charge for this body was to research and identify these measures for the county. That was the first step, but there was 2 more steps. It's like we've completely forgot about the other 2 steps. The next step was to plan and oversee implementation of these measures. I haven't seen very much of that. I mean, it was very disheartening when, we're part of a couple presentations. One, when we went to the Board of Supervisors to talk about the sheriff oversight, and that was just completely shot down, felt like a complete waste of time, all the months and all the time we put into this to research, identify, now comes time to implement. There was crickets. Then we made a presentation to the mayors. We were still collecting information to get, the local law enforcement, because we had great participation from the county, but on the local level of all the mayors, we need the individual data from the individual cities and agencies. And again, crickets, nothing. Like we got nothing from that. We really need to do a recalibration or reconfiguration or figure out what we're doing, because we're wasting everybody's time if we're not going to actually implement any policies. If we're not going to actually do something. We can talk about doing things all day. I'm on enough committees that talk about stuff, but I like committees that we actually do the work. We actually get into the weeds and we actually do the work. So I think that should be a big focus. And I think that there's going to have to be a big come to Jesus moment, because I know my views weren't very popular about, I think we already have it in our charge. I've been through the recommendations that were approved by the Board of Supervisors. And it does say we have the authority to implement and oversee these things that we are researching. And And it seems like there's this tension now that we don't have the power to actually implement anything. We have to give it to the board and they're gonna decide. And it feels like lip service versus actually things. Everybody's time in here should not be wasted. We should actually do something. So I think there should be a shift. And now we're implementing things. Now we're actually getting policies, or we're overseeing, we're working with other partners, or we're actually putting these things that we're finding in place. So I think that first point, the recalibration, is something that we should really kind of direct our energy on this year. And we really need to see about getting things done. So I'm sorry we took so long to jump on here, but
any other comments and thoughts before we move into our goals and objectives? So this is very colorful, Patrice. I'm not exactly sure how we want to go through it, but
So, in the, attachment here, you have the prior years, I'll say years, because a lot of this stuff goes over. Set of objectives, activities, and recommended deliverables that this body created, some time ago. And, we met with, our co-chairs. I believe we had all the chairs possible. And we went through, the objectives and highlighted the ones that we identified as essentially in the completion category. Like that particular objective has to some degree been met. So those would be those items that are highlighted in green. There are other items that were highlighted in yellow, which were somewhat of those kind of low-hanging fruit, that there's been some discussion among this body on this item, but maybe there hasn't been a whole lot of progress necessarily, but it's worth continuing to look into. And then there are those that were highlighted in blue, and those were the objectives and the correlated activities along with them, that are items that are pretty substantial in nature and require some revisiting in the future. So we can start with the first one, and feel free to jump in, any of the chairs or Chris, as I go through this. But the first objective here was seek funding to implement improved procedural justice practices and implicit bias training. So that was actually completed and done several years ago. Now I'll also make this comment that even though some of these items have been, we would consider in the completion category, that doesn't necessarily mean that those aren't items that are worthy of having some kind of update to see how things are, things of that nature in regards to that. So here we noted that it was completed, might be worth revisiting for possible updates or other action items. Objective 2 is to ensure inclusion of de-escalation, behavioral health intervention trainings into local law enforcement, regional academy, and or department orientations. So this was one where we felt that we needed a full job feedback on in terms of next steps. This is one of those items that there's been, well, it will require knowing what actually currently exists from within local law enforcement departments in terms of how they do their orientations and their trainings around these respective areas. So we can assume that this work is happening to some degree. We just don't know what level that is. And so that will require more discussion from the body. And this is in alignment with recommendation 6. And I'll step back for just a moment. These objectives and then the correlated activities are all stemming from the 18 or so recommendations that this body, that you were speaking to, are charged with overseeing the implementation of, right? Okay, objective 3, provide resources to incentivize or provide schools with non-punitive discipline practices such as PBIS and RJ, restorative justice, as well as behavioral health and early intervention services for youth. We'll put a note on this one. This correlates with recommendations 8 and 9. And so this is one, again, there's been some conversation in this body around these items, particularly, I would say, in the diversion subcommittee. Some of these things have been discussed. Probation has brought to diversion and maybe SEEF, I believe, our work around our restorative justice initiative that's funded through Measure X. So there's conversations happening around this. It might be worth still moving this one forward or possibly prioritizing it. Objective 4, county criminal justice agencies shall establish formal partnerships with community-based organizations to provide greater capacity for diversion, reentry programs, alternatives to detention, pretrial services, and in-custody programming. Now, and this is in relation to recommendation 10. The note on here is we're uncertain of the path forward and we'll need our jobs feedback on how to prioritize this. Reason being, and I'll echo some things that Chief spoke about in terms of recalibrating the body on this. All of these things are being discussed in multiple bodies, in multiple levels. Yeah, so we would need somewhat of feedback, or at least discussion should take place with this body in terms of how do we fulfill that specific objective board, given all the places where these things are either being discussed or looked at. I'll go down to objective 5. This was a specific call out for the Public Defender's Office shall hire social workers who can assess clients' psychosocial needs and the services. This was correlated with the call out in recommendation 14. This is highlighted in green as in done, but there may be a possibility for any revisiting possible updates to see how that's going. But we're hopefully many of us are aware that the Public Defender's Office has a whole social work unit. And so the impact of that might be worth looking into. Objective 6, all CBOs shall be evaluated for efficacy and effectiveness of program goals and objectives to ensure populations are appropriately served. Community input shall be an integral part of this process. This is also correlated with recommendation 10. This was highlighted in blue as, again, revisit for future work and updates. Because this is stating all CBOs, don't know really in what setting and what areas, what specific, when we're looking at across the continuum of the criminal justice system, juvenile justice as well, what sorts of programming and all of that would need to be identified for this sort of level of evaluation. So we've identified it as possible work to revisit in the future. Objective 7, establish a community capacity fund to build the capacity of community-based organizations, especially those staffed by formerly incarcerated individuals, to contract with the county and provide services to reentry clients. This is in alignment with recommendation 11, and we've highlighted this as one of those items that should continue to be prioritized. There's been movement on this in the community engagement and funding subcommittee, which was some of this probably discussed earlier. Objective 8, encourage the Superior Court to return to the process of jury selection whereby jurors are called to service to their local branch court for misdemeanor trials, as well as general equitable jury pool selection and inclusion. This is in alignment with recommendation 13. We briefly actually talked about this during a data subcommittee meeting, not this past one, I think the one before that. We highlighted this as a possibility to begin prioritizing for this year's set of goals. Because we feel like that there's some potential to make some inroads here. And then I would say lastly, but no, we got several more. I'll try to make it quick. Objective 9, the Public Defender's Office, either directly or through partnership with community-based organizations, should offer civil legal representation to clients as well as immigration representation and services for youth. This should focus on educational advocacy. This was an alignment with recommendation 15, highlighted it as completed, but it might be worth revisiting for future updates. Objective 10, expand eligibility for pretrial services and increase pretrial services staffing with a focus on reducing racial disparities and replacing the money bail system. Recommendation 16. So not so much this latter part of the statement can be going, because this is still being deliberated, right, to some degree, replacing the money bail system, but nonetheless, the expansion of pretrial to some level has happened and would be worth revisiting for future updates. Objective 11, ensure collection or reporting of accurate data in all criminal justice and law enforcement agencies countywide. This is in alignment with recommendations 5. This has been an ongoing conversations held within the data subcommittee. So I don't know if I highlighted it as completed, because it's definitely not completed, but it's been worked on. We'll say that. Objective 12, provide analysis of interventions implemented through the Racial Justice Task Force and Racial Justice Oversight Body to measure advocacy and assess impact on racial disparities. So this is alignment with recommendation 5. So I think this correlates well with the earlier objective around evaluating CEOs and the effectiveness of their programming. So we've identified that as some future work. 13, the county and or our job shall collaborate with the CCP to consider increasing realignment funding for community services. I marked that as a lot of ways, well, it's happening now. I can't say it's actually completed, but that very thing is happening literally now. So with the CCP's agreement and PPC also in alignment with their thinking to have 15 million of the fund balance for AB 109 resources be dedicated to expanding reentry services. So planning around that through the Community Advisory Board is happening presently. And then objective 14 expands the current pre-release pilot to serve all individuals in custody. That is in alignment with recommendation 17 that is currently happening now through the Office of Ed and its administration of the Game Plan for Success. It is available to all individuals in all 3 different facilities. So I'll pause there, or I'll at least close this out by just highlighting again that we're uplifting that this body consider prioritizing, at least for this year, objective 3, objective 7, objective 8. And although we're considering for future work would largely be objective 6 and objective 12. Those that were I'm sorry, can you briefly repeat those? Sorry, okay, yeah, I know. To prioritize for this year, objective 3, provide resources to incentivize or provide schools with non-punitive discipline practices. Objective 7, establish community capacity fund. Objective 8, encourage the superior court to return to the process of jury selection. Basically making it more equitable for folks to be on juries in their local area. And that's it. For potential future work would be objective 6. All CBOs shall be evaluated for efficacy and effectiveness. And objective 12, provide analysis of interventions implemented and to assess their impact on disparities. The two objectives that were not highlighted that probably requires more information and research would be objective 2, ensure inclusion of de-escalation and behavioral health intervention trainings into local law enforcement. And objective 4, county criminal justice agencies shall establish formal partnerships with CBOs. I'll pause there. Yeah.
Is it possible for objective 3, and you said with type of recommendation something, is it possible to show that recommendation? Because I think
Recommendations 8.
in objective 3, so the one related to school, in the original recommendations, do you have that material?
We can, Gary, on you think you'll be able to quickly find the, I don't know, the, oh God, it's the kind of quick snapshot of all of the, almost like an executive summary of all of the recommendations. We posted them over and over, so we'll be able to kind of pull it up and hopefully pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'll take a look for it.
So that third group, I mean, the first group is you want to prioritize this year, the second group is you want to look towards the future. What was that third group?
The third group, we're sort of identifying as requires more information to determine what next steps are on that one.
Right, so then, sounds like prior to me joining this board, there was, objective 1, there was some implicit bias training, and so with what's happened after COVID and doing, there's been so many staff changes. I know to participate on a board like this, we do a virtual training. So it's the effectiveness of a training that's going to make an impact or a difference. And if we're saying implicit bias training and that's going to solve all the problems, then we're kidding ourselves. So we probably should always keep something that continues to give those who are working with individuals an opportunity to learn why are you not sending some individuals to jail and sending others to jail. So I would necessarily call it implicit bias because it's racial bias training. Because that's where the issues are. So when you're implicit, it's like kind of, could this have been? Our data shows is definitely racial bias. And so we need intensive training around racial bias if we're ever going to make a difference, because there needs to be consequences for the officers who take a course and continue the same practice. So I would think that we would not give up on that. And then we need to look at who needs to be trained. And I'm not sure if it was identified here, who should be taking this training, but anywhere where you see disparities, there should be a requirement of a real racial bias training. And then for number 2, yes, and I know the sheriff's department has started again doing the behavioral health intervention training, but NAMI has a contract with behavioral health care to supply the lunch. So it gives me the opportunity to design the team that's going to do the part around the family stories. And prior to me coming to NAMI, it was all white Americans sharing their story as family members. But now, because I have culturally reflective staff, I have individuals who can share from AAPI, Latinx, and layer in, and this is what it often looks like in our community with language barriers, et cetera. So we're not there if it just is about doing the trainings, and they kind of stopped for like 3 years, and now that we've started back, I am optimistic that we're on the right page, but a lot more of that needs to continually happen when you have the same disparities where 25% of the individuals who live with mental illness and who are harmed are from BIPOC communities. So I don't think you ever stop doing that kind of training and having an office like the Office of Racial Equity kind of monitor, those kind of, I mean, how do we gauge improvement? I don't think you can just do a training and think, oh, solve that problem, because we continue to see the disparities in our criminal justice system. And then another question, when we make comments here, how does it fall on deaf ears? Or do we say, oh, let's act on it? Because I don't want to just be saying something. It's like, it's in the notes, it's in the minutes. But that if it makes sense to do things different, if there are actions that take place after you make comments, or we just talk about it?
I think for this piece, you could be moving to add that one like back into the 3, right?
Okay.
That might be an action step today. If what you're saying is like the 3 recommendations you think would benefit from having the 4th be part of it.
Because it sounds like they were the top 2, right? I don't know if this was listed by priority, but it probably was at the top of people's head of what needed to happen. And they landed in 1 and 2 spot. So I don't think these 2 ever go away.
Well, right, training could be one that's like annually stays on the plate, sorry, Stephanie.
It's not necessarily prioritized in a way, but to your point, I think that one of the things that we haven't done, and there was a lot of, I think, discussion around, is it implicit bias? Is it racial bias? How are we looking at this? And, there was some disagreement around what would actually be good training for different agencies to have. Who are those people that need to go into this training? I think one of the things that we haven't done is that follow-up. Like, trainings happen. I can't remember who attended the trainings, but we haven't done any follow-up with like, okay, well, did anything change? And I think that's one piece that we should revisit and figure out.
Who provided the training?
I can't.
So it was fall break, it was, so I know the training took place before I came into the ORA.
Yeah, it was when
But it was an organization called Fall Break that provided both implicit bias training and training around procedural justice. I believe they trained public defenders, attorneys.
That was before I was here.
Yeah.
My very first meeting for RWB was when Fog Break was giving their presentation and it was virtual.
Okay.
So it would have been like
So,
2020.
But we do have a final report that they did provide to us, so happy to share that as a kind of a refresher for everyone about what took place and all of that.
And I think I attended that meeting and had some concerns with them, that particular group not being necessarily the most effective at being able to. Oh, I didn't realize that after all
That
those
was a
comments.
concern
that
with
we-
other people.
Yeah, but after the comment that the department did still went on with them, even though many community members said they don't necessarily represent the group that might carry the lived experience to do the best job. I guess I should have came back to the next couple of weeks.
Jim?
I was just at the training. It was a diverse group across the county. We had Dr. Sophie from Health Services was in my training group, other staff members, DAs, everything, public defenders, I think were in there. It was open to whoever, with a variety of trainings. I personally thought it was phenomenal because I had already done implicit bias, but with the procedural justice piece. It may not have been perfect in everybody's view, but I thought it was a great step forward for everybody. It was a robust discussions that we had and a diverse population taking the course. So we got the voices from a diverse population within the group too. So I just wanted to add that feedback. It may not have been perfect. There may be a better group out there, but for what it was great.
Was that training specific? I mean, did we just attend it or was it specific to us?
I think it was in fulfilling the recommendation, there was a recommendation in here that called out implicit bias training and procedural justice specifically. So forgive me, I don't know all the backstory on it, but I'm sure there was a competitive bidding process to bring that group on to make that training available.
Yeah, and I can't remember if they were already, it was kind of already in the process. It wasn't necessarily just for this group. It was open for this group to attend, but it was more countywide agencies that were attending.
You know what I'm saying? Were we the ones who managed that or who brought that training on? It was our recommendation.
It was our recommendation. I forget who exactly found the group that did the training.
And anyway, as a result of this group's recommendation, it is a countywide policy that county staff also do implicit bias training. And the board of supervisors last year added on all of our advisory body training for anybody sitting on an advisory body.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just wondering, was it a training that was already happening that we kind of, you
No, it
know?
was as a result of these recommendations.
Okay. Thanks.
I see hands going up.
I don't know, I mean, do members have priority or privilege? You guys go first. I just want some questions of clarity, actually, and apologize, I'm catching up, we're catching up. So these recommendations here, or that, not on this, okay, so these are original recommendations that were put forth by the Racial Justice Task Force when this body was created back, I think, in 2018. So that's, I'm clear on that. And then the other document that you just shared where you have all the different kind of.
The work plan built from.
Yes, okay, want to make sure, so they're based off this.
Yeah.
That means everything that is in your work plan has already been approved by the board, because they approved this set of recommendations when presented.
Yeah.
So so then from that list, from the work plan that you had, which you created, I guess, some time ago, we're trying to figure out which ones do we want to prioritize for this upcoming year, which I think speaks to maybe Issa's point, like how do we just kind of refine our focus so that we can set achievable goals, right, for the community. I'm following.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But we don't need to go back to the board for any kind of approval to move on any of these priorities because they've already been approved.
So the recommendations have been approved. The respective activities that come out of this or the results of implementing those activities, so to speak, have not. So for example, the establishment of a community capacity fund, which is called out in the recommendation and it is tacked on as an objective in the work plan with subsequent activities to that. But the question I think that CEF has been asking about for quite some time is what's the actual funding allocation to that fund, and then what would that fund inherently do, or if there's a need for technical assistance support to even create the guidelines and what have you around that. So there's just all these nuances that still require feedback and approval from members of the board in order to further it along.
So particularly around, can we have additional resources in order to implement some of these things?
Yeah.
And or, I think this was to Mel's point, if we ever want to push forward any kind of policy recommendations or changes to legislation, that's of course when we have to go to the board.
Yeah,
But
I would say those are examples of each of these recommendations, which I would just say from ORJ's vantage point, these are pretty lofty and large in terms of intensity of work of all of these recommendations. And so they in and of themselves can be their own projects that require either some additional resources, additional capacity that's needed so on and so forth. So all of those other elements to each of those recommendations would still need to have some sort of direction or clarity, either from, so I'll make this caveat, either from the board of supervisors or from the impacted agency, right? So for example, the conversation around the diversion criteria, obviously DA Becton's team have been very engaged in that. And so they're doing their own work through the diversion committee around how to adopt that policy that's going to be held within her office. But in the Office of Ed, I'm sure may have something that they would want to explore and look at. Public Defender's Office has had their specific call outs on social work and they've done their work in that regard. But all to say, they still require some work to have some level of approval, either from department head level or from the board supervisor.
And I can ask one other quick, so then that means we have a list of potential priority projects. It's a mixture, some actually need board approval. But then others just require departments to be able to get behind. Some things can be done within departments that don't necessarily require additional funding. And those decisions can be made in this, within this body, within those departments, right? Am I?
But, well, potentially, I think that was the other element that Chris raised in his recommendation about building those relationships directly with especially the justice agencies. So now there's a recommendation around gathering data from all local law enforcement agencies. And we have probation that submitted data, we even have Office of Ed submitted data, Sheriff's Office who submitted data. But to actually gather data from then local police departments, that hasn't necessarily happened. And also, what is the facilitation to make it so? And then the next level steps of the analysis and all those kind of things. So, but at least for those county department heads, which we have one who has her hand raised, who wants to speak to some of that stuff. Certainly, whatever is impacting their department, certainly they would be open to having those conversations. I don't think yet direct conversations have happened with those respective agencies, with the probably the exception of DA Becton and the criteria, divergent criteria.
Well, and I think that's where some of the frustration, if I might speculate, comes from some non-ex officio members of this group, is with acknowledging the limited authority that the county has over municipal jurisdictions, right? And so I sit on the Chiefs Association. I think there's large support for things, but we've even found through our Strategies for Youth initiative that's funded by Congressman DeSaulnier and wide support, staffing challenges, timing challenges, things of those nature, getting approval from their leadership at the council level or whatever, or their labor's agreement or whatever the case may be. Like as a county body, we don't have authority or even pressure over any of those things, right? And so I think the struggle we run into, and we really do see it when it comes to disparities, and I like to frequently remind people that yes, on the juvenile side, we're on the front end, but on the adult side, probation's really on the back end, right? Like our decision-making is kind of like the caboose of the train, if you will. And the front end decision-making is largely municipal law enforcement. We have, as a general body and as county agencies, like very little oversight as an oversight body of that. So I think that that's something that when I say we really need to make sure our scope is narrowly defined and there's a general understanding of when we say we're an oversight body, what we really have tangible oversight over. So we're not feeling like we're in this unproductive kind of hamster wheel of conversation. You know what I mean? Kind of level setting, if you will.
Also, we used to have a sheriff's representative on here. I'm not sure if they're
Yeah,
still here.
he couldn't make it today,
Okay.
but he's.
And then we also had a rep for law enforcement and it was supposed to rotate. But I feel like there hasn't been anybody in a very long time, but that could be kind of that liaison with local law enforcement. And I feel like that's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle, especially like through the pandemic.
So chairs, their hands being raised and they're looking at me, but I can't call them.
So back to the reason I wondered about the recommendation tied with objective 3, because back in the original, we're here, it has diversion subcommittee and ORJ and county office of education.
Yeah,
Right?
Gariana, can you go? And that's 89, I think, is where you guys are called out.
And it goes back to what kind of Issa said originally when these recommendations, it's like, that's all good and fine. Nobody has oversight of the county office of education, but I'm happy to bring forth whatever I can. But then there wasn't like a seat at the table for diversion for anybody from the county office of education. So we're like, and it became just what's West Contra doing in the area of diversion, which doesn't represent like the 18 school districts. So I'm just hoping if this does become a highlighted objective, we do look at what's going on countywide in this area and that we can have conversation, look at data about the entire of the schools doing PBIS and that type of work, and not just, bless you, but not just West Contra doing the diversion.
Well, I think originally that was the goal. It was to get really good at something based on the data and then replicate that across the county. And so, although West Contra Costa is in here, I think, speaking from the school side of things, there is a school to prison pipeline that exists. And if you look at our school data, we've already shown that it mimics our criminal justice data. And I was just thinking about when we were talking about diversion, what that looks like. If you even look at expulsion processes, what does true rehabilitation look like for a student? We place students in school programs that are not representative or reflective of what a rural school looks like. And we expect them to gain skills to basically be able to generalize those skills then back into a full setting. So we're not setting students up for success either. And it breaks my heart when I see the programs that we have. And I think someone spoke to, like, would you go to that program? Would you put your child in these type of programs? We really have to think from a rehabilitation standpoint, even in our school programming and what we're doing around diversion for students, because it's real. We're in 2024, but just the behaviors that we're seeing and the manifestations of those behaviors, the manifestation of mental health conditions in our schools are really real. And I think we do a lot of good things, but I think we continue to miss the mark, especially on our most vulnerable youth. So yeah, so it was never intended to be West Contra Costa, I know you know that, but I'm hoping that we can do something really good that can be replicated across all 18 school districts.
But if other representation or somebody from the county office isn't at that seat, just never going to, right? Like,
I agree.
Like coordinating council in the place where all the school districts need to discuss. It didn't get to that place. Right. That's where it needs to be, because that's where the school districts are. That's all. Just a seat at the table.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how we left you all out, which is, I don't know.
Honestly, I don't even know how I got a seat at the table.
The Georgetown project.
Well, no, yes and no, but that seat actually rotated as well. So we had a representative from, I forget if it was Pittsburgh or Antioch, school board.
Member, and then they.
Yeah, and so we were rotating folks out as well, and then, because we worked, I've been working so closely with.
I'm very familiar with GMU.
It's like two different conversations going on. No, I was not trying to hone in on both.
That's
but
your job, Chair.
I also be the hand, so Stephanie, you had your hand raised first.
Yeah, no, I said what I wanted to say.
Oh.
I was just saying that we did have a school board member from East County that had been on the committee, and then and I don't know what the rotation is supposed to be. I'm not sure like when rotation happens.
Oh, it's interesting, the school board member had you all put county office of education here, and they were like, oh, there's nobody been from the county office of education, any of these meetings ever, and then we. Place there. So I just want to make sure that somebody from the county office can participate at least peripherally in some of those.
In diverse.
I keep looking at her and I'm should be looking here, but I'm drawn to the screens.
And I know at one point we had the director from the county office of education.
Oh, Becky.
Becky.
Yeah, Becky.
That's it, yeah.
So Becky was chair of data and was very active.
And then she came to our RJOB diversion meetings.
She did.
Yeah. But there was somebody before that too. I just can't remember what her name.
Yeah.
From Metro.
But
Yeah,
if you would like a proxy to participate in, we can talk about offline to see who you
We
want
might not have space. There's limitations is all. I think it might have been that too. There's limitations.
to. In order to maintain all kind of quorum, we can certainly.
We shoot it to Chris. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, to that last point, I thought I could have sworn we had Nick Berger attending.
We did.
So I think he just we just haven't seen him in a while, but I think we were trying to avoid this issue by having by having Nick in the meetings with us. So I definitely think it was, from the subcommittee standpoint, always the intention of having the county office of ed represented there. And to LaShante's point, right, the overall plan was always to make sure that what we're doing with West County was a pilot, just to sort of figure out the methodology to get information from students and family members potentially about what they need and how to respond to those needs in the ways that those recommendations lay out, as opposed to just kind of coming in with PBIS and RJ sort of writ large without tailoring it to exactly what students and folks who are in direct knowledge of student and school life have to say about it before trying to just wanting to tailor it to be responsive. And so once that pilot is done, then taking it countywide and making sure to replicate or even improve the process from there. There are a number of things that I could say about everything that has been said. And I'm going to choose to say something about a point that Gigi made that I think is very important. So Gigi asked earlier, right, when we say things in this meeting, are we going to respond? Is something going to happen? Or am I just talking into a void? And I recall having this conversation when we've done community forums in the past of saying, we really need to think about that. If we're asking community to show up, we can't have folks do public. I know it's business as usual to have people come into meeting spaces like this and we do public comment and we just kind of smile and nod at what they say and we keep it moving. But the point is, just because that's the way it is typically done, doesn't mean that it's the way that the R job has to do it. And certainly if we really want to build those community partnerships, it can't be that way. People want to feel like they're being heard. And they want to feel like they're being thoughtfully responded to, or at least, there's some thought about how to begin to put something into action thoughtfully that is reflective of what's being shared. That takes a little bit of time. And it might be, somewhat, awkward, or may not always be, 100% immediate, because these things will be happening in real time and we don't know what exactly we'll hear. But I just think it's something to shoot for. And that means that could also really prolong, a lot of public comment as well, because it makes it more of a dialogue. And I get that for efficiency's sake, there's this point of wanting to allow everyone a chance to be heard. But if you're gonna be at all responsive, even if you're just saying thank you so much for sharing that, I definitely think that's something that we need to consider. And I think we can put our heads together and develop some next steps for how to deal with that, right? Like something to that end needs to be responded to people if they're coming, especially if they're coming physically, but even if they're just virtually attending, they're still giving their time to this. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that, and then make sure that we're following up and ensuring that we are as reflective and as responsive as possible to the things that are being shared. So I love the fact that she asked that question, because I wanted to jump in on so many things that you all shared before, particularly in the last round of conversations before we got to this point. But it was just, it would make for, a very, very long meeting and very, very long conversation. But I do think we have to continue to think about ways to make sure that we're responsive and make sure that people in this body itself, right? Because Gigi's on this body and she had that question. Make sure that you all feel heard, and you feel like there are actionable next steps to the things that you share. And in doing so, make sure that community always feels like that as well.
I agree. And I know one of the reasons, well, I'll speak for myself. I think one of the reasons it can be sometimes hard to even remember what's been said in different meetings, is because we actually don't take notes in this meeting. We just have the act, or what is it called, regular action. And I know part of that is because we just don't have the staffing for that. And I know like ORJ has been doing a lot. And so I completely understand that that's hard. So I don't know what could happen, but I do think we need to think about how can we take a better record so that we can go back to the things that are said, whether it's said by the public or whether it's said with board members. Because I do think part of it is that we forget what's been said, and so we don't go back to it. And we can't acknowledge like in real time when somebody says something.
And this goes to both Christopher's and Gigi's point. I don't remember if it's this board or one of the other boards, but I recognize some of you. Some of us have a consensus model, so it's true. If some, like, let's say I say, hey, I have an idea. We need to come to a consensus, we're gonna act on it, right? So we don't want people feeling like just because they throw out something out as an idea that we're gonna move on and act on it unless there's consensus of the board. Do we have a consensus model here? No, because you know what I mean? Like Gigi had an idea, she might think we're acting on it, but there wasn't a consensus about it to go forward. And we might want to think about, you know, developing a consensus model with some of our other groups. Just a comment.
Thank you. And to Gigi's point about the training, I appreciated the point she made, and I would also be in favor of moving objective one, seeking funding to implement improved procedural justice and implicit bias training. Again, the training maybe should even be called the anti-racism training, and this is very 2018, but I do think having like a thought, you know, a think tank around what is the training, where is the funding, and potentially with TA from ORESTA. Melvin?
Yeah, I mean, just even listening to the feedback about the first implicit bias training that had, and even some of these other recommendation areas, part of me is wanting to figure out a mechanism if things are timely on, like, if we're putting these recommendations forward on behalf of this body, if there is a proposal, an RFP, RFQ, or short list or whatever, like creating an opportunity for this group to at least give a recommendation on how we'd like to move forward before an action's actually taken. Because what I heard is like, okay, yeah, we did accomplish goal one, but it was mixed feelings about how we accomplished goal one. And it sounds like that recommendation was just kind of put out there. It's like, okay, you said you wanted this, here you go, but we didn't get to like look at a short list and say, well, maybe this is a group that we think might speak more to the nature and goals of what we want to accomplish than the other ones on this. Now, there's, I don't know, just some sort of like feedback mechanism, so our voice feels like it's mattering at the table. We're not just telling somebody a general goal and then they're kind of painting the picture of like, oh, so you want it like this? Like, no, let's talk about how we want it to go down before we move into that implementation. And thinking about that for any of these areas, if there's an opportunity for this body to get feedback on the recommendations that are being worked on before they actually go out for prime time, let's give that feedback and see how we feel about what's being presented or what the implementation may potentially look like.
I agree. It's not the type of recommendation where you would do it and check it off and then it's like done for your life.
Yeah,
like getting your driver's license. So I think acknowledging it as, you know, like an annual process, and it seems like there's maybe some new county infrastructure. And then I had two other comments. One, and I promise to spare you all my longer version of this, but I'm very passionate about it and I will give it to you at any point, is on jury selection. So I could not agree more that we need to prioritize encouraging and advocating strongly to the Superior Court to return to a process where both folks that are residents in Contra Costa can go locally to be on a jury And that allows them to, of course, be able to serve as jurors in their local community. And then it allows my clients, most of whom are people of color, to have the shot, just the shot of having a person of color in their panel. I can't tell you how many times an attorney comes back across the street and says, 100 jurors showed up for my client's trial, and my client's a Black male. And there was only one Black male in the panel, or one, Black female, or, everyone was white. And so we have to do better. I practiced here for a long time. Back when I did jury trials pre-2011, those panels looked totally different because you drew them from the community. So if you were West County, you sat in West County, you weren't somebody who lived in Richmond and got cited to go to Pittsburgh, which is what's happening now, or lived in Brentwood and got a jury summons, come out to Richmond. And I can't tell you how many people I talked to, that are potential jurors, what we're hearing inside of the courtrooms, and the terrible impact, and how this just really propels the incredible racist outcomes that our clients have. So our office has litigated this. We wrote a letter to the Superior Court last winter urging them to not adopt Local Rule 2.1. I know it's not sexy down with Local Rule 2.1, but asking them to not adopt the rule, which they did not. They decided to adopt the rule despite our objection. But the rule was saying, hey, we're happy to just keep pulling these countywide, and we want to really establish this long term. So that happened in January of 2023, despite our objection, despite us citing this body's recommendation, despite talking about the branch courts, which are in Richmond and Pittsburgh. They have the highest concentration of low-income, non-white people in the county. Public transportation, I'm not telling you all anything you don't know. Public transportation is so cumbersome that for folks to get across the county can take hours and hours. And who does this impact in terms of folks that can't be jurors? You all know exactly what impacts this is having. There's a long history in Contra Costa of underrepresentation of Black jurors. We litigated this I guess the year I got my bar card back in 2001 in the Curry case. I was not the lawyer, but the court found that Black jurors were underrepresented in Contra Costa's jury pool. A fair cross section was denied. So this has been going on. There's now a Racial Justice Act. So my office will continue litigating this, but our local bench are appointed by the governor and then elected. And I do think there needs to be a strong show of support from the community that it's unacceptable. So I can go on and on, but that's my short version of why I think Objective 8 that there should be really strong advocacy on that point. I did have another one. I just wanted to tag team on Isa's sort of county scope comment. I couldn't agree more that kind of figuring out where we can have that impact. But one of the things we thought about for law enforcement, for example, the 24, 25 law enforcement agencies, how do you make an impact when they report, to their city councils and the county is not the funder? I do think us as the county's racial justice oversight body, putting together best practices and recommendations for data collection, for training, and for interfacing with the community for de-escalation tactics for the county, even if it's not binding, it allows us to say to an LEA that's not following that, hey, this is the county, this is the Board of Supervisors, the sheriff and the DA and all of the partners and the community together recommended this to the Board of Supervisors. They adopted this, and these are the best practices. You can say we're going to thumb our nose and not follow them, but I think that's something that there can be, a lot of pushback and advocacy around. So I agree completely that there isn't, a binding authority over the Pittsburgh or Antioch police departments, for example. However, I do think this is the group and the right space to establish a countywide best practice for things that the community wants to see from law enforcement. Thank you. Gigi has her hand up in that as well. Gigi?
Thank you so much. I appreciate what Alan spoke to. When people believe they're going to get a jury of their peers, and that rarely happens in this county, because if you define peer, then you got to start looking at lived experience. And one of the shortcomings I thought with the implicit bias training was because of the group that was being trained in the subject matter around racial bias in our judicial system, it would be very hard for me to pick a group of individuals to do a training who've never received a phone call asking if their loved one could put money on their books or even could receive a collect call. So that's why several people called me and said, hey, Gigi, can you please join this committee and voice your opinion about this particular group doing the implicit bias training. I think we could do a lot of work with our RFPs and the language that's in the RFPs to make sure who's ever applying for particular jobs are reflective of the communities most impacted. They have that lived experience. So thank you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to finish my sentence.
Thank you, Gigi.
So I just, piggybacking, and I appreciate that I have to be, I have to be a little bit circumspect in what I can say about what the decision was made in terms of where we're drawing juries from. I wasn't involved in it directly, so there's not much I could say anyway about that. What I will say is that the avenue certainly exists for a group such as this to add by communication, by letter, or by something, the context for why there is a broad-based support for returning to what we'll call localized jury pool drawing. I can sort of sit on this committee and as a court representative as requested as part of this and communicate to some court leadership, but something broader that communicates what the RJOB is, what it's doing, why it's particularly concerned about this, and what effects members of this committee see as the current jury selection process having on the community would certainly be considered in any ongoing discussion about this. I don't think I'm out of line in saying the court knows that this is an ongoing discussion, that it's an important issue. Obviously, the public defender's office has communicated on it too. So I just simply say that avenue is also open to add voices to the desire to have that change.
Thank you. Very robust conversation and discussion. I do want to add just for objective 6, and I know it's highlighted in blue, but one of the thoughts that came to mind is that we do have some other bodies that kind of does this work. Like, I'm not sure, well, when I was sitting on CAB, we did have like a survey that went out to CBOs that actually received $8109 to see like how well is their program going. And I'm just wondering, like, when we do finally, decide to work on objective 6, if we can look into other spaces that have already done surveys with CBOs, and instead of like reinventing the wheel and gathering more data, if there's already something out there, revisiting that. And that was just one other thing I wanted to add. But are there any other public comments? I'm also keeping an eye on the time because we still got to right. So if there's no other comments, we can move to agenda item number 5, which is to discuss and review the RDOT meeting schedule.
Can I ask a quick question before you move
Sure.
on? So from what I heard, of the items the objectives that were highlighted as ones to prioritize, are we hearing from the body that we want to in fact prioritize those and include in that list revisiting the implicit bias, or in this case, maybe look for racial bias specific training or anti-racist training or whatever? We could figure it out a little bit more with the right appropriate subcommittee or in-board leadership on that one. Did I get that right?
That's what I heard.
Do you want a motion?
Not necessarily. We just need to, get guidance or feedback on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I see heads nodding.
I see heads objective.
I don't hear you on
Okay, all right, cool, thank you.
All right, So we're taking a look at attachment 3, page 21, 22, just to review the schedule. And I think the objective here, Patrice, is just to make sure that folks are in agreement with these scheduled dates and times. Kind of foresee the future of if we're gonna make quorum or not.
And just to get general feedback, so what you have here, are dates that are already scheduled. You all should already have these calendar invites, FYI. Reminder, okay? And also so that you can see the cadence of the meeting, for the various subcommittees. Right now, data and C for community engagement and funding subcommittee meets monthly. Diversion meets every other month, though it has been some internal conversation about whether or not C will be meeting every other month as well. Okay, so but as it stands on the schedule, it is currently a monthly meeting. Most of these meetings will take place either in one of two places, due to meeting location availability, either here at the county administrator's building or at 50 Douglas Probation Department, 2nd floor. So if you ever think like, oh, it was supposed to be here, I thought it was here, we'll wait for you. Just come 5 minutes down the road, 6 minutes down the road. We'll accept you then. But all to say that we wanted to just be sure we were mindful of any major scheduling conflicts that might pose the issue for any of the members, particularly around the quarterly meetings. Those are really important. Subcommittee meetings, we can always reschedule and or create special meetings. But quarterly, everyone's taking out their time. They have to all be in place. And we have to I just want to highlight this too, we have to meet quorum in person.
Yes.
Okay, so when we reach out to you and ask for your RSVP to attend, don't say yes and then just show up on Zoom. You let us know if it's yes in person or, oh, I can't make it in person, can I make it on Zoom? Because we also have to identify whether or not it's a just cause related situation, emergency, yada, yada, yada. All of those things, we have to help us help you. This is the best way I can say it. So when we reach out, please let us know whether it's a yes or no, you can attend in person. If you cannot attend in person, we'll work with you from there to figure out next steps. That's my presentation. Any questions you might have.
Thank you for coordinating us.
I could not do this without Mariana, so I appreciate you, Mariana. Shout out to her.
Well, with that being said, are there any public comments? Any comments at all? I think we're good. Perfect. Moving right along, item number 6, discuss membership status and recruitment.
Yeah, so we just wanted to give you guys, I think where we left off at the September meeting, you all approved changes to your bylaws. So that way we could create an additional community representative seat that will focus on behavioral health fields or experience or lived experience in that, as well as creating 4 alternate member seats, which in some ways can serve as like a proxy to the community representative seats, given that our ex officio members are able to have proxies, and that certainly helps to sustain quorum in a lot of ways. So we wanted to create that sort of balance there. We will be presenting the changes to those bylaws at the next equity committee meeting. So that way we can have it referred up for final board approval, and then that way we can recruit members to fill those seats, as well as we have 2 current vacant seats as well on the community representative seats. So just wanted to give you guys those highlights and updates, and know we will try our very best to streamline this and fast track it as quickly as possible. We do, though, periodically still receive some applications here or there from community members. So there's no shortage of interest to be a part of this body, but we just have to establish the process to make it so. So Just wanted to share that with you all, and more information will be coming in terms of a timeline and press release and all of that jazz, when it comes time for membership recruitment.
Any questions? An update from the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. And Peter walked away.
And it's so funny, because can I share our introductory comments?
Well, I can at least introduce you guys, and maybe he'll throw on in.
Okay, yeah, maybe we could just ask people to stretch too, because.
Yeah.
I've been sitting for a long. I don't know.
Sorry, Matt, shut up, you need
No, I was saying 30 seconds.
I'm passionate about like. You're not in your.
And what I find is
Oh, yeah.
Exchange.
And then I've got it on.
And I'm like.
It wasn't on the item we finished it.
like, you need to on here to write on, like for it, right? I'm really active in my student building. So I can down. So folks are taking a quick break, so just bear with me on one moment as we recalibrate.
So I will pass it to Patrice for introduction and then go. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is a long awaited opportunity.
Oh, we don't have a quorum in the room.
Oh, see.
Sorry.
Pause. All right, we're back on. So this has just been. Okay, so, this is a long awaited, presentation and welcome to, the Racial Justice Oversight Body. We are so excited to have Kendra Carr and Peter Kim, who are co-directors of our new Office of Racial Equity. This body has for some time, talked at length about how, once the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice comes online, the support that will likely come with that, but then also just more broadly, wanting to understand and know what's sort of the scope of the new office, how does it align with the work that RDOT has been doing for quite some time. So
Without further ado, I will turn it over to Kendra and Peter, who will walk us through their presentation of the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice coming online.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrice, and yeah, thank you, through the chair, to everyone who invited us to space, give us some time to talk to you all. We realize that while it's kind of, this work is new to us and that we've been here now, 4 months, for many other folks who've been kind of hearing about and following and tracking the progress of our department, it may feel like, oh, it's been over 2 years and finally someone's in these seats. So, when are they coming on board? Well, we're here and we're really looking forward to seeing how we can try to engage and partner with all the folks throughout the county, both in the community, within the county. But this body in and of itself is actually of particular interest to us. It has been suggested and proposed that we get involved, not just as participants, but potentially even staff this body. And it makes a lot of sense to us, to be honest. We're actually no shortage of work, so we're not looking to staff advisory bodies. But to be clear, in the recommendations that informed our office, which were powerful because it was community informed and community led, and it had what was vetted by all the folks who were kind of needed to do that. It was actually a little thin when it came to how does our office engage in the space of criminal justice and equity within that field. So when we heard about this body and the work that you all do and who's at the table, just made a lot of sense. Like, okay, that could be a space. That could be where we can lean in, where we can really get a good solid sense of what the challenges and opportunities are. And I just also gotta say, looking at who's at this table today, I mean, you are all the heavy hitters, the decision makers, the leaders of both systems and community organizations that are steeped in this work. So one, it's very indicative of kind of the commitment y'all have. Like you guys are coming, spending 3+ hours in these meetings, and I know that you all have no shortage of work yourselves. So that says a lot, and that's actually really encouraging to us, that being a space with you all. But I think, Issa, what you said is real. There's also a lot of limitations and places where our reach doesn't quite get there, right? So we're eager to see how we can support and kind of, again, lifting up those opportunities, taking advantage of them when we can as a body, but also understanding what the limitations are and then trying to figure out ways around them, underneath them, over them. That said, we don't see ourselves able to really jump into that role of staffing the body, at least for about another 5 or 6 months. We're gonna talk about what our priorities are moving forward in terms of hiring to staffing up our office. It's just us two right now. And we know that ORJ has done a lot of work to kind of staff this body, and not just this meeting, but all the subcommittees. And so we don't foresee ourselves actually staffing right away, but we want to start attending and learning, being a part of the conversation. Until then, so we just thought today, maybe we can introduce ourselves and talk about who we are in our office to give you all a sense also of where we can contribute. So that's just kind of a little segue into our presentation.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add thank you for this thoughtful work, this robust work. Listening to you all is interesting, listening to the parallels between some of the questions that we have. We're asking the same questions about where's our power, how can we use our visibility, how can we use the momentum to move things forward? But we're asking some of the same questions. And so yeah, just thank you for letting us come to introduce ourselves today. Some of you have heard this presentation multiple times. And so what we're gonna try and do today through the introduction is just kind of like scan through, given a broader overview than we have in other settings, and just try and allow more time at the end in case there's some particular areas we want to dig into more or you have questions about. So we'll do it that way. But just wanted to share these first 4 months, we probably talked to, I don't know, 75 people. We talked to a lot of people. We're trying to catch up in a lot of the ways, we are here because of a community engagement process. Our work is not going to be possible without deep collaboration. And so we've been trying to build relationships. Some of you around the table are going to get some emails from us so we can meet. But we just want you to know that, this work, just like the work of this body is really grounded in like the community needs. And so that's where we want to make sure that we're anchored. Vision and purpose.
Yeah, actually, Garyana.
Yeah, she'll move to this one.
Oh, thank you, Garyana.
Thank you. So, and we're gonna kind of run through these slides, because I think many of you here have already seen some of these. I mean, we want to try to save as much time to have some conversation. So we're gonna skim through some of these, but our vision and purpose ultimately is really for the county to try to improve its ability to engage residents so that they experience safety and peace and connection, well-being, and really liberation and freedom to be their full selves. So we do this by addressing policy, looking at resources, and also educating folks, both within and throughout the county. And ultimately, we look to assess, support, and coordinate the many different efforts around equity that's already happening. We are not coming in here building a brand new wheel. None of these issues that we're addressing are brand new. And folks in this room and beyond have been working on this for a long time. We want to strengthen that. Next slide, Karen.
Yeah, so the process to get to our office started in 2020, but maybe even before that. But the 2-year engagement process started in 2020. Over 3,000 community members were surveyed and participated in listening sessions. And overwhelmingly, what people shared is that they want some support in addressing the harms that have been caused by public systems. They want to see a decrease in violence in their communities. And then, you know, they want more resources around healing, around food justice, around housing, around policing, and just really opportunities for meaningful engagement with county departments. And so that this, again, our work is anchored right here in these needs and priorities.
Next slide, please.
Next slide.
We're gonna kind of, again, quickly scan through some of the priorities that we've already established for ourselves this upcoming year. And you're actually gonna see some alignment with the priorities of this group, and that's actually really exciting for us, because I think we can dovetail a lot of different ways. I'm gonna go over the community focused ones first. Because I don't think we've said this, our co-director structure is really, we're kind of taking oversight of 2 areas. I'm more community focused in terms of trying to build a relationship with the folks in the community, making sure they have a seat at the table, their voices are heard, and that our decisions are led by and informed by community. Where Kendra's focus is more inward looking at within the county system, how do we align the different efforts and processes and practices of our different departments. So for the community focused priorities, you know, we want to get a countywide landscape analysis of racial inequities and inequalities across the county. Again, not recreating a wheel here, starting all over, but kind of gathering all the different reports and studies that have occurred over the last many years and kind of bringing them into one place. And I think that's hearing that data is a priority in this body. That's really exciting to us. That's kind of informed in this piece. We're already engaged in supporting the establishment of an African American Holistic Wellness and Resource Hub. This is something that was approved by our supervisors through a lot of community advocacy, and which Gigi was actually an integral part of. So we're supporting that effort by helping to facilitate the staff of a steering committee to oversee the procurement process. That's going to create a feasibility study for that hub. We, out of our office, want to kind of do pilot 2 small funding projects. One would be to fund capacity building grants for grassroots organizations, smaller groups, that small infusion of cash can really actually make a big difference. As well as another fund that pilots a program on how to fund community healing programs or programs, activities, really by residents or community neighborhood groups, not so much organizations. But we're hearing a lot from the folks that we speak to on the ground that stuff like that is happening. People are coming out of their pockets to do it. So how do we actually support some of this work? Both of those, we're not going to ultimately be a funding agency. That's not our role. We don't think that's our way that we will contribute. But how do we actually model certain kind of pilots, some models around funding, and then share that with other folks within the county as a way to kind of do that. And it's similar to what I think this body's talking about. How do we model things here so that maybe the rest of the municipalities can follow along? So I think that's in that spirit. And then finally, how do we increase community participation on our multitude of advisory boards and commissions throughout the county? How do we really get people with a lived experience that have that expertise on those boards in meaningful ways? And I think that's something that seems to also be shared here as well.
Yeah, thank you. On the next slide, so for our systems focused priorities for this year, first we want to take this inventory of what's happening across the county. And we heard discussion today about there are lots of conversations in different advisory bodies. How do we sort of coordinate that? That's one of the roles. We see that as one of our roles, figuring out where those efforts, where we collaborate and partner on those efforts, which ones we fully absorb, like we're talking about our job, and then where we just need to be a coordinating body. We have these quarterly spaces where people come together and share updates. So that work is going to take place this year, and we'll have that inventory and you know, some structures worked out. The other thing is we want to support departments in creating some racial equity plans and some budget equity statements. Our goal is that each department is going to have their own goals and objectives around racial equity, that they're allotting budget to be able to achieve those, staff to be able to achieve those. And we see our office as being, you know, a place where we're reviewing and monitoring, providing technical assistance to departments as they're doing their own racial equity work internally. Also, this year, we're going to roll out our language equity access plan, which this was started by EHSD a long time ago, and they were like, wait, the office is coming. And so it's been sitting on the shelf for a long time. So this plan that's already been developed, we're going to roll out this year. The other thing that has come up in this conversation, we definitely, as we onboarded and took this implicit bias training, we were a little concerned about the rigor that was required. It's in click right now. And so we definitely want to support the county and building a robust racial equity training, so we can actually build awareness. You know, so we can see outcomes, not just in awareness, but we can see it in practice. We can see folks, you know, changing their practices as a result of these trainings. And then finally, we just want to pull together this hub of racial equity resources and toolkits. We want to have a place, a library, if you will, for people to go when they're ready to engage in different phases of the conversation, to be able to pull from a resource hub. And so on the next slide, we're, you know, we have to build out our capacity this year. And so this is what this slide is about. We're staffing, we're bringing on 4 hires this year, 2 coordinators and 2 analysts to support us. By 2026, we'll get to a staff of 13. That's our fully developed staff, a staff of 13. Where in terms of data collection, again, it's similar. These conversations today really resonate because we are building, we want to build our own data collection, our own database dashboard, one that's public facing, one where we can assess and measure the equity effort. And also, this is one of the recommendations that came out was we need a place in the county to receive complaints from community members that are experiencing some form of harm. And so we're building out that system as well.
We need to get the word out. So we are also trying to this year come up with a communication strategy that is also going to include a robust engagement strategy. That is the mission of our office. So it's going to include a lot of proactive outreach, engagement activities within the community listening sessions, conversations. And ultimately, probably not this first year, but part of the vision of our office is to have satellite sites in communities which are most impacted by racial inequity and its associated harms. And then we also need to establish our own lived experience advisory board. This will serve really as our advisors, but also as our champions, so they themselves can also be equity leaders within their own communities. Provide us with real-time insights and expertise, keep us honest and accountable. And to do that, this group really needs to be made up of people with lived experience who have actually direct or intimate exposure to the type of harms that come out of racial inequity. We're going to go into those type of harms in a moment. We're looking at 20 members with 10 by district, 10 at large. One thing that we want to lift up and potentially serve as a model for other advisory boards is how do we also ensure that our members have the skill sets and have the training and have the onboarding that they need to be successful and effective and have a positive experience. These are our ambassadors for the county and the rest of the community about these processes. So they need to have a positive experience where they feel it's meaningful, they're contributing, so they can go back with the other people to get excited about also participating. Next slide. to really lift up the type of experiences that we really want to prioritize on people having real expertise around. We looked at this survey that was conducted by our core committee prior to us coming, but that informed the creation of our office. And in it, they actually surveyed the over 3,300 folks that they spoke to. What are the kinds of harms and traumas have they experienced that that stem from inequity? And so these are your county residents that have kind of spoken about the type of harms that they've experienced. This is an example of the type of categories that we'll be lifting up when we are selecting the folks that will be on the advisory board. Okay, that's it for a quick nutshell of what we're trying to do. You can advance the slide or you can stay here, but we now just want to open up questions and thoughts. We move too fast and you wanted us to go back to any particular goal or priority, or you can just ask the questions. Melvin, or through the chair, can I just start calling on you?
Somebody that raised their hand before. No. All right, cool. No, it was a good presentation. I think the main question that I had, just even looking at the chart for some of the feedback, was it those 75 individuals you talked to that participated in the survey, or how many folks like participated?
3,300.
3,300, okay. No, nice little small. And I guess, you know, when I'm looking at violence, I definitely had my experience, unfortunately, with being a victim of violence. So when we're talking, what were folks' like feedback when they mentioned things like economic violence or neighbor violence? I'm not sure. I'm assuming goes deeper than the type of violence that I'm fortunately accustomed to.
Yeah, so in this I'm sorry, if we can, there, the government violence in the corner upper right hand. That was a term that the survey used, but really I think that spoke to some of the more kind of violence that emerged from systems, engaging with systems and not getting the kind of supports they needed, or feeling like they were getting resistance or just opposition from systems, particularly maybe around economic violence, maybe around violence with trying to receive services at different departments. This is not exclusive to just county systems though. People were thinking just more broadly to the systems in their cities and local communities. So I mean, I think that maybe some of what you're saying.
Just wanting to get more context in general on like, how are we defining that very charged word is all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what was pulled out from there was the violence that they experienced with law enforcement. And so they pulled that out as a separate category. So I mean, that kind of encompasses, I think, some of what you're saying, but maybe not all.
And then we can also go back to series. We're still working with series for a couple more months. As we onboard. So the survey itself gave them these boxes, right? They were only able to like select the box, but then there were follow-up, like qualitative, like these community cafes. And so if that's of interest, we'll be at these meetings ongoing. We can bring back some more qualitative data from those listening cafes that kind of inform more, where they were able to tease out more with those men. We can bring that data because
And just to clarify, 3,300 people were surveyed, but only 2,655 said they experienced harms or violence.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I say, this is not really as much to do with this, but sort of structurally, where, like organizationally, where does your office sit in relation to other offices that we work with? Just, I'm not in the county, so I don't have an idea of the setup quite yet.
Yeah, so we were positioned, we report directly to the Board of Supervisors, but it's through the Equity Committee. So we were staffed to the Equity Committee, and so every monthly meeting, we provide, updates, what we're working on. But we report directly to, I think there was conversation about should it sit in the county administrators? There were conversations about structure, but the community felt like we needed to have at this office in order to have authority and in order to have access to decision-making and bringing policy recommendations that structurally we should report directly to the Board of Supervisors.
And I think, technically, like all departments, we actually do report to the county administrator's office, and we work really closely with them. I think just in this beginning time, because the equity committee and the board were so instrumental in moving our office, establishing it. Yeah, they're applying some heavy oversight as to how we move in this
But-
first couple of years.
But just to clarify, they're their own department and they're the department heads, they're co-department heads. Just like Ellen, the public defender.
Thank you.
Our budgets do not reflect.
Okay, I was like. Well, you know, 4 months, right? We're trying over here, but just to do the math, I think we're like 3% of the county, but like, so anyways, never mind. Let me wait. I'll wait. I'm saying get tired as the afternoon gets goes on. 0.03, that's right, at the budget. Anyway.
So that's actually significant percent.
Oh, yeah, I know. 0.03.
So
Right.
is the plan to have you, regular part of our quarterly meetings or subcommittee meetings? Or what's kind of the goal?
Yeah, the goal, I'm looking at Patrice. Patrice, thank you. Thank you. For all of the onboarding work that Patrice has done with us. So the goal is for us to staff, our job, so that the Office of Reentry and Justice can participate more, you know, as a collaborating, department. So that's the ultimate goal. So we'll attend we're here, we'll attend these meetings, we'll attend the subcommittee meetings. And thank you for the slow transition as we just get ready to absorb it all. We don't want to interrupt the process, the momentum. You know, we want to be thoughtful about the transition, but we're here, we'll participate.
Yeah, and if I could share, so the three of us have had quite a few sort of transition planning discussions, and part of that discussion, as you just mentioned, is just sort of onboarding them of the work that's been happening so far, all of the documentation that's been developed through this body over the last several years, where things stand, sort of our membership structure, all of that. And so what we've at least agreed to continue to do as ORJs, at least support some of the administrative pieces that are still left to be done, like getting the bylaws approved, doing the membership recruitment, all of that, establishing the structure, the scheduling for everybody for all of the various meetings. So that way, when they are ready to take it on, there's already a flow happening for this body for this year. So there's not a whole lot of interruption there. We also took some time to look through the recommendations themselves and start to identify where there's some possibility of alignment with some of the other buckets of work that they're doing. They just, they mentioned that they feel like this could be the piece of work that really speaks to the criminal justice elements. But as you see in the recommendations themselves, they kind of, yes, they're criminal justice related, but then there's other elements such as the community healing, the capacity building, funding, and things of that nature. So there's definitely a lot of alignment in terms of the work itself that we're still trying to tease out and strategize around, but then also taking on the staffing at some point later this year.
Can I just add also, because it's been discussed in here as far as the objectives go. You know, the data piece, you all have heard me say for years that the challenge with the data piece is we need a separate entity outside of the individual departments who can take the data and analyze it, including from our law enforcement agencies who are more than willing to give the data. There's just no receptacle that's not part of another division, which, ORJ is part of probation. So we didn't want to have those sort of challenges. So we are hopeful that when Brenda and Peter get up to speed, that there will be an analyst so that we have a repository for that data. So, I know it's been super frustrating for all of us because we want the data, we want to see the data across all the different departments and divisions. And this has always been the discussion from the Board of Supervisors as a solution to that. So fingers crossed that things move forward as quickly as we hope with hiring so that we can get that data analyst in and start really looking at those numbers and determining where in the system, we can make changes to help with the issue.
I think on that is, I think, a real priority. I mean, that's one of your priorities here that you've already established as something we want to see, which is a better collection and like that receptacle, that repository for the data. Maybe that's with us, but actually, we're also wanting to look at and explore some other spaces, like, one that just keeps coming to mind. I kind of introduced his name at the last data subcommittee meeting that I attended. There are like, we have something that's based out of UC Berkeley called the California Policy Lab. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with it. But having a research institution who actually does this throughout the state, collects this data and has all the necessary protections and all the different things in place to really ensure confidentiality. And they also just have a team of analysts. I mean, that's like an example of one avenue to explore. But yeah, those are the kind of ideas we want to discuss with this body. I would love to ask a question. Yeah, and something maybe to seed so that over the next several months, as we're attending these meetings, you all can start thinking about this. Is we got big shoes to fill. I mean, Patrice and Garyana and the whole RJ team is doing a phenomenal job, and of course, all the support that Christopher and the Burns Institute has been providing. There's no way we're going to be able to just replicate all that work. But as you guys are, one of your goals is to reorganize, reconfigure how this body actually comes together. Part of that should also be, what is the best way as staff with that? How can we support? What do you really need from us to help move the work of this body along? Is it just kind of, so that's something to be thinking about as well, because we want to make sure that we're effective and we're valuable, and that we try to do exactly what has been done, and let's do it. If there needs to be tweaks or adjustments, and we'd love to hear from you on that. So maybe that's something to be thinking about.
Any other comments? We appreciate you all coming and giving us a overview of what's happening with the time. I'm super excited. Data subcommittees. So yeah, Melvin.
I was gonna say, whenever you have your community cafe discussions, don't forget to share the calendar by us.
Want to make sure I didn't miss anybody online. Do we have any? No, okay, cool. So, last but not least, agenda item number 8, to discuss report from our subcommittee. Now, we have one for Steve, right? Or at least there's no attachment. Is there?
Yeah, but we do have a verbal update. First of all, thank you, Melvin, for stepping in as chair for the last, some part of last year. He took it on as a new member of our job, so we really appreciate that. But he will be stepping down as chair. In the meantime, Renelle Ellis has decided to step up and serve as interim chair as well. So seat will be meeting, we will have, crossing fingers, we will have an upcoming meeting where a lot of that work can continue forward.
Again, do I do public comments for this section? I'll just wait for after all.
Or just go through all of them.
Okay, so, for data, we met a few times, September 28th and October 26th, and then we just met recently, this week, but it's not attached to this report, but, just some things that we talked about in those meetings is, we discussed the process to recommend additional data points to the sheriff's office. So we all know that the sheriff does quarterly reports to the board of supervisors. We review those reports in our data subcommittee meeting and just kind of see like, okay, well, what is missing? What is additional data that we would like to see? And we kind of discussed that. We also discussed how we want to utilize that data. So how is the data that we're collecting going to benefit diversion? Or how is it going to benefit community engagement? What can we do to make it easily and readily accessible to folks? We don't want to just throw numbers at folks. We actually want to like tell a story, because it's one thing to just throw numbers at people and they're like, well, what the hell does that mean? So like, what's the story behind those numbers is something that we also talked about. We also talked about the youth training for law enforcement agencies. There was an update there that I think it's rolling out in April.
Yeah, first. cohort training will be this April.
So that training is rolling out, and within that training or within that program, there's also an annual evaluation. So again, we always talk about implementation, how well is it working? So there is an evaluation associated with that program. We talked about NACO's Familiar Faces Initiative Agency Update. On October 26th, we defined the role of our job. We discussed and reviewed the recommendations, the data plan, similar to what we did today. It's like, what were the objectives, what were the goals, how we completed that? If not, how are we rolling it into 2024? And then again, we just reviewed the oversight report from the sheriffs. And then we did actually see, because, the Board of Supervisors said that they wanted to see certain things included in that report, and sure enough, the next report that came out included some of that data. So it is progressing. And then our recommendation to the full body is that we are recommending that the full body review, discuss, and decide on which data points we would like to request to the sheriffs to include in the next quarterly. And then actions requested, also discuss these asks at the full body meeting, and then vote on which asks we want to move forward. So that's the report from data.
Just quick clarification, discuss the ask at the next full body meeting.
It should be
this one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to clarify. So, because we did review the, sheriff's oversight report just this last meeting, which is not included in this report out. Is that last week?
This week.
It was this week.
22nd.
Really? Okay. And that was the fourth quarter report. Okay. So many things. It was the fourth quarter report, and as Shayla mentioned, each reporting, there's added data points, some of which were points that internally the data subcommittee was thinking or wanting to see included, and it just so happened the board of supervisors had stated those same report, data reports in their prior meeting or at whenever. So we did start to see that. One of those key pieces were seeing a racial demographic breakdown of bookings per arresting agency. And so we did see that in this last report. So I think we probably need to spend some time discussing a little bit further the data subcommittee level of the items that we saw or that we were originally wanting to push forward, which of those are now included and which are those that we still want to see move forward. I know there was some data points that data subcommittee was looking at having to do with gender and age breakdown as well. So just wanted to highlight those pieces.
And just to add, in conversations with the Center for Policing Equity that we're partnering with the Public Defender's Office, they are so willing to give technical assistance. So I actually feel like on this specific question of what are best practices around law enforcement reporting data, they've seen sort of nationally what those trends should be. And then I think they did observe one of the prior sort of oversight reports and may have some feedback about what they've seen in other jurisdictions be really productive data reporting. So they're happy to also meet with you. And it seems like the staff subcommittee might be a good space.
Yeah, so we talked about that too at the last data subcommittee meeting about how to utilize Center for Policing Equity, bringing them back. It was more or less though around any outcome data they had on their sort of public safety redesign projects that they originally presented to our job about. So I know that there was some feedback from some our job members on the fact that their last presentation didn't have outcome data that folks wanted to see. So I think we could certainly ask them for both of those elements. Given time, should we?
Yeah, pass it to the Stephanie.
Yeah, so I'll be super quick because it's 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things is that, we do actually, I think we need to just take a look at the adult eligibility criteria one more time. Just to see if anything needs to change, because I can't remember if we actually did it at the last meeting. But, we did start a work group on youth diversion criteria. And so we just had one meeting. We'll probably have another meeting before our next subcommittee meeting. Thank you to the DA. Annie was on, Ellen was on. I think it was just us and and Chris. Yeah. So, I think we have a good start, and so we'll have more that we can share with the full committee and with the full body the next time that we meet. And we did have a presentation from LaShante on the listening sessions. It was kind of short because we ran out of time, but we're hoping to have a follow-up on how those listening sessions turned out at our next subcommittee. Then we went over our work plan. We can't do that.
And it is 4:01, so I will just do a quick, is there any public comment before we adjourn? Y'all ready to go, I can tell.
Well, we can't wait to see you.
May 2nd.
One more time in person.
And just FYI, I'll send this out to ORJ, but because Ellen's talking about juries, and we'll be doing a viewing, it'll be open to the public, but it'll be on the documentary Judging Juries. And we'll have a panel discussion afterwards, so stay tuned.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.